So most underrated position group for the Hawkeyes. I'm going to make a case that it is the Iowa running backs that are most underrated. There you see Mr. Kamari Molton out of Cardinal Gibbons High School, the Fort Lauderdale product, the Florida kid, just a sophomore. Can you believe that with Kamari Molton? Feels like we've seen a fair bit of football from Kamari Molton, and yet you look up and he's just a sophomore. You could have, this season, and if it's a great season, obviously he could make that leap to the professional ranks, but it's not inconceivable that you could be on year one of Kamari Molton as your bell cow Iowa running back. Maybe a couple of years that you get Kamari Molton toting the rock for the large percentage of the carries for the Hawkeyes. I love Kamari Molton, the bits and pieces that we've seen. If you've been a regular frequenter of this channel, Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live, my program on Mondays at 6 o'clock, Thursdays at 6 o'clock, you know that Kamari Molton, for me, I said coming out of the open spring practice that Kamari Molton looked like the number one running back. He looked like the best running back for the Hawkeyes, and I expect that to be the case once this season boots off. He is a preseason third-team All-Big Ten choice, and just to revisit some of what's happened for Kamari Molton, 473 rushing yards a season ago. That obviously the best of his two seasons thus far. Just 93 rushing yards in his true freshman campaign on 27 carries. Did have a couple of scores, but really the bulk of Kamari Molton's production was last season, in a season where we all know that Caleb Johnson was out there resetting record books. So, not all bad that Kamari Molton was able to put together nearly 500 rushing yards last season. 473 rushing yards, 84 carries, 3 touchdowns a season ago for Kamari Molton. And I think we're going to get a lot more from Kamari Molton this season. I say Iowa's running backs are underrated, in part because of the respect that I have for that guy on your screen right there, Kamari Molton. I think that he has a chance to take a big-time jump this season. And we saw bits and pieces of that last season in the bowl game, before the bowl game. Look at the final month or so of the season for Kamari Molton. Let's revisit, shall we? November 2nd versus Wisconsin. 9 carries, 74 yards. He had a long of 30 yards rushing in that game. November 23rd at Maryland. 12 carries, went over the century mark, 114 rushing yards, had a touchdown in that Maryland contest. Obviously had the big explosive 68-yard touchdown run. Mizzou in the bowl game versus Missouri. Again, another chunk run in that game, a long of 38 in that bowl game versus Missouri. 14 carries, 96 rushing yards, had a touchdown in that bowl game versus Missouri. So 3 standout performances to close last season. I think that's an important item for Kamari Molton, for Iowa going into this season. It is not always a guarantee that if you close a season well, you carry that over into the next year. But I think you certainly sit here in the offseason and say, yeah, I feel a lot better that we saw Kamari Molton do that at the end of last season, even as he was outside of the bowl game versus Missouri, not the lead guy. Obviously, Caleb Johnson getting the lion's share of all the carries, and yet still versus Wisconsin, 9 carries, 74 rushing yards. Maryland, 12 carries, a $114 and a score. So I love what we've seen from Kamari Molton. I'm sure he is chomping at the bit for that starring type role, that leading role. Okay, then you get beyond Kamari Molton and the Iowa Hawkeye running backs. You still have Jazzy and Patterson in that mix. 24 games played. So Jazz Patterson, he's got a legitimate amount of seat time under his belt. He had 309 rushing yards a season ago on 63 carries. Numbers in 2023 and 2024, pretty similar for Jazz Patterson, 206 rushing yards in 2023 on 58 carries. So 58 carries in 23, 63 carries in 2024. And each of those carries figures could certainly go up for Jazzy and Patterson this season with the Hawkeyes. 562 rushing yards so far in his career on 135 carries. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns. We've seen Jazzy and Patterson at times, similar to Kamari Molton, delivers some nice things. The run versus Iowa State comes to mind with Jazz Patterson. Beyond Molton, beyond Patterson, who I think certainly I feel really convicted, Kamari Molton at the top of the depth chart for Iowa. That was the case in the spring prospectus. Looking at the depth chart, Kamari Molton, not an end-all be-all, but he was the number one running back going into the spring, the depth chart we've seen so far. Jazz Patterson, the number 2 running back, according to Iowa. So that's your 1-2, at least for now. And I feel pretty convicted that Kamari Molton is that number 1 Iowa running back and will remain that number 1 Iowa running back. But beyond those 2 guys, you got Terrell Washington Jr., who I would love to see Iowa and Tim Lester. This is maybe a discussion for another topic, another day, or later on this evening. I'd love to see Iowa continue to involve Terrell Washington Jr. more, both in the run game, get him some jet sweep action in the throw game. I'd like to see you just dump it off to him out in the flat, or have him go run some traditional slot receiver type routes. I just want to see Tim Lester get into his bag and involve TJ Washington Jr. a little bit more. But at any rate, that's another running back. He's working in that running back room for Iowa. Nathan McNeil, true freshman, who I thought, again, was a name coming out of the open spring practice that was very impressive for Iowa, showed some flashes, some reasons to be optimistic. And then you got Brevin Dahl and you've got Xavier Williams. So Molton, Patterson, TJ Washington, McNeil, Dahl, and Williams. That's a pretty good 1 through 6 running back room. I know that the star power of Caleb Johnson, you're clearly replacing that, and that will not be duplicated this season. I don't think Kamari Molton or any of these guys are going for 1,537 rushing yards and 21 touchdowns rushing, and what was it, 23, I think, total touchdowns for Caleb Johnson, the big superstar touchdown late versus Nebraska that won that contest, saved it, and then set up the win for the Hawkeyes. So you're replacing some big-time star power. We all know that. We all understand that. And because of that, that lends itself to where people say, oh, Iowa, they're taking a big step back in the backfield. And look, it's going to be I think, drop off clearly from Caleb Johnson to Kamari Molton, just in terms of sheer star power. But if the offensive line is good, and if you add a more complementary passing game, then I don't think that Iowa rushing attack will fall off as much as maybe some people out there are hoping or thinking that it might. And that's with full understanding of and respect paid to Caleb Johnson, what he was for the Hawkeyes a season ago. So that's my vote. Most underrated position group for the Hawkeyes headed into 2025. I'm going with running backs because, again, I think it's easy for folks out there nationally to get caught up in, well, wait a second, you just had this Caleb Johnson kid who set all these single-season Iowa marks, program records. He's gone, and you expect to duplicate anything similar to that on the ground through the air with your running backs in 2025? Maybe not just individually, but Kamari Molton, I think, is primed to take a big step forward. Jazz Patterson, I think, is ready to be that number 2 running back if called upon. And I like TJ Washington, McNeil, Dahl, and Williams down the depth chart as well.